I'm with now, I hope I've pronounced this correct. It's Covadonga. Covadonga?
Yeah, Covadonga.
And I think I asked you this. It's actually well, I suppose the first things first is if you could give us a brief synopsis of the film. I know what it is, of course, and I've seen the film, but this is obviously for the benefit of people that haven't seen it now. But Covadonga that's a place. Is it in Spain?
Yeah, it's a place. It's kind of a historical or a religious site, a cave in the north of Spain in Asturias, in the Asturian mountains, and it was the site of this kind of stand made by Don Pelayo and the Catholic resistance from the Moor invasion, and it's kind of whatever it's alluded to in a monologue in the film, and I just used it as well. I suppose I should now move on to the synopsis of the film, which I should.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. Have you been there? Have you been to this place?
I have not. I've never been to Spain. My travels are limited. In Europe, I've only been to Ireland. My mother's from Ireland. She's one of 10, and she's the only one who came over. So Blimey. I spent my whole youth going to Ireland for full summers. And but other than that, I've been to Italy with my wife on our honeymoon, and the UK to visit some family. But have not been to Spain, but look forward to getting there. And was very moved to read about this. This place and this historical event, especially considering how it related to the story I wanted to tell.
Okay, no, I did wonder, and sorry I interrupted you actually. So yeah, if you could give us a brief synopsis about. I should point out actually again that you are obviously referred to as a filmmaker, but you're actually the writer, producer, director, editor, lead actor. And often as I speak to, amazes me when I speak to some filmmakers, how you've got the tenacity and patience and drive and dedication and energy to wear all those hats. Because I know just doing one thing, just being a director, without sounding patronising, incredible job. But I don't know how you pull it all off. I don't know how you can, honestly, just unreal. I mean, wow. Anyway, yeah, I'm sure we can get on to that. But yeah, if you could give us a synopsis, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, Covadonga is a story about a man mourning his wife at a secluded lake house in the woods, and this young couple kind of trespasses on his property. He observes what he believes to be a crime and kind of reacts, and the movie's kind of about the reality of what he's seeing and how his kind of the darkness in his past might be influencing his behavior, and that's kind of not to interpret the film for anyone, especially those who haven't seen it, but that the story is kind of like about how we respond to the inevitable darkness of our personal pasts and our global pasts, and it's kind of explores cycles of violence, and with, in my opinion, the only kind of opportunity to escape these cycles of violence being forgiveness. But the movie, I think, explores some of the darker responses to tragedy and also some of the darker impulses in our nature.
Thank you for that. And it's often said that you write what you know. I mean, far be it from me to put words in your mouth, but is there anything that... I'm not trying to get too personal here. If it's stuff you don't want to talk about, I totally understand. But have you drawn in any of this from own experience? Was it completely off the cuff that you wrote this?
Yeah, I think it's all very... I mean, I obviously haven't, or I can say that I haven't been in the situation depicted in the film, but certainly the emotions and kind of... the way I interpret and digest life and the kind of lessons I want to communicate are in there. As far as, I do play the lead, so there's a fair amount of me, but I hope that line is drawn at some point because the character does get a little overboard. But
yeah, I know what you mean. I have seen it. I know what you mean.
The music, the music, and like we were discussing with my family, it's all drawn from kind of, a deep well of emotion that I'm kind of just opening the faucet and pouring it into this story that I think it will be captivating and provocative for an audience, and communicate some of these emotions that I have within them. As far as, that's probably what I can say about that. I'll also say that we've all experienced loss in our lives, however immediately kind of related the parties have been, or we can all think about what is most important to us and how losing it might feel. So I kind of draw from the way I feel about how much I cherish my family and my relationships, and how the world has a way of taking them from you.
And again, brilliantly explained. Where did you get that? Did you know the locations? Because the location, or the main locations is really lovely. But is that from the family connection? Is that somewhere you scouted?
That's a good question. I wrote the script with a friend's lake house in mind, in Covadonga, New York, which is an hour from the city, and it was a much smaller, more rustic space, and it had been vacant for years. So I said, you know what? I'm going to write something I can make here kind of quickly and cost effectively.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I did, I presented the idea to the homeowner, and they had, since rented the space. So that was
I knew you were going to say that, or sold it. I saw. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
It's all good. So that was the first kind of roadblock building towards this production. But I just put out some feelers. Well, first I scoured the internet and emailed a bunch of Airbnbs and kind of rental by owners, and didn't have a ton of luck there. Saw some options, but didn't necessarily have the control and autonomy I was looking for.
Yeah.
So through kind of a college network, somebody referred me to someone with this lake house in Pennsylvania, and I liked what I saw in the scout, and it was actually going to afford us some more help production-wise, because the entire crew and cast could stay there while we shot, which was a lot of fun making the film. So logistically, it helped to give us a little more space. And of course, as you saw, I think it's a really beautiful property. So I had focused on one location so as to limit moves and make be able to shoot it quickly and all that good stuff, and focus the story. But what I also found, and what hopefully the audience finds, is you've got this house, you've got the hill, you've got the lake, you've got the woods, you've got kind of the rural streets, you've got the church. So there's a lot of color and versatility within a pretty confined area. No,
it is beautifully filmed, actually. Because although you as I say, you wore a lot of hats. You weren't the DP on this. Where did you find? You weren't the DP, were you? You had a separate DP for this, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a cinematographer, Alexander Crow. It was our first time working together. He was referred by somebody I'd worked with on my last film, and it was a great partnership. I'm pretty specific about the design of the shots and the moves and the way I plan to cut them together. But he just brought a great just technical capability to executing these shots and specifically lighting them. He's very much an artist with light, so I thought that took everything to the next level for sure. And we just had a great small crew that worked wonderfully together. So I'll take that lesson and hopefully mimic that experience on future productions.
No, like I said, it looks lovely. And did you actually storyboard it? I guess you did. I'm not entirely sure, of course.
That's a great question. It's funny, my first film, Beach Villas, I storyboarded the whole thing. I drew it out. This one, I kind of was because the script has such little dialogue. I was writing the script with kind of shot listing in the script, which you're not normally suggested to do as such. But because I'm writing and directing, I don't have to get approval from anyone. So I was kind of putting a lot of the visual information in there. And at a certain point, I'm like, well, this is becoming tougher to read as a result. And for the drawing, I love to draw. It's something like I grew up doing, and I think it informs what I try to do visually, but it's really like it takes a lot of time. So you get to the point where I'm like, well, I could just explain the shot faster than I can draw it, and I could work on other stuff in terms of getting the production together. So if I had to storyboard the whole thing, that probably takes me another couple months where I'm not making the movie. So I just rely on my ability to kind of explain myself.
No, and it's a really good answer, because I suspect what a lot of filmmakers, new filmmakers, don't know is, and obviously I only know because I've spoken to, thankfully, lots and lots of filmmakers, is just how long it takes to actually storyboard a film.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and even the drawings can be rudimentary, but anyone who's a filmmaker is kind of very specific, and of course spends a lot of time to get detail and kind of specific angles in, and it's super helpful. So I would never think of throwing away the preconception of the visual approach, but I can also kind of do that in my head. I'm able to kind of keep it all up there pretty good.
And also, I know you mentioned Beach Pillows. I haven't seen it, of course, but what would be interesting to know, particularly other filmmakers that might be starting out, did that specifically help the project, or this project, frankly? Did it help at all? Because I see here you've got, I was reading again, this is on your bio, and it's still got this cult following, so I'm guessing that, I don't want to say that, was that a foot in the door, but did it push things in a certain direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any filmmaker will find that getting the first feature made as a first-time filmmaker, well, getting your first feature made, it's like a chicken-egg conundrum. People want you to have made something in order to make something, so it's kind of prohibitive for entry. So the first one, I was able to attach some notable casts that people were aware of and raise some money around their names. So that was helpful. The lessons and of course that was helpful in approaching people for this next project to raise money or work with me or anything like that, because you have, a calling card, something to show people, and that I believe proves my kind of aptitude or competence at least. So, but as far as lessons I took from it, that was an independent movie on a small scale, and I wanted to make it look like it would cost much more to make. So we made that for, let's say, a couple $100,000. Yeah. And I think it looks like a movie that was made for at least a few million. But what I found was, we still had 50 people coming to set in trucks and all this. And I said, influenced by some of my kind of heroes and filmmakers that I know focus things even more and got things smaller, whether it's John Cassavetes in a New York independent thing, or even someone like Stanley Kubrick, who, if he wasn't shooting, big battle scenes with infantries, he had 10 people on set. So, if you know what you want to do visually and you have the tools to do it, and of course the bodies to do it, you can kind of focus the crew, and that was my goal. So I was able to make this for about 1/10 of what I made Beach Pillows for, and I think it has a lot, and as a result I wanted to push things creatively, kind of as Orson Welles said, the death of art is the absence of limitation. So I wanted to kind of adhere to little money, focus script or location and cast, but just outside of that, break every rule I could creatively and kind of do something special.
I interviewed Stanley Kubrick's cinematographer a couple of years ago, and he was the coolest. Wow. Yeah, and he was like the coolest guy you'd ever meet. And what was interesting was I knew who he was, but he was promoting a film that he had directed. But I kind of thought, how do I ask him about him without asking about him? Because you really wanted to know about him, didn't you? But luckily the conversation fell that way. I must upload it because it's a really long interview which I condensed down in a written editorial, but I guess I'd have to ask him first. But he's a really cool guy to talk to, and the stories he told me, as you imagine, are absolutely amazing about Kubrick, are really, really interesting stuff. And also interestingly, an interview I had last week in Madrid, we were talking about John Cassavetes, and obviously everyone looks back, a fantastic filmmaker, but I was kind of under the impression that he's become more well known after his death, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily the truth.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I can only speak for myself. He passed away in the 80s. Yeah. And I was born in 1981. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he passed away in the 80s. So I, of course, wasn't necessarily aware of him as a child. But I didn't even, and maybe this is, a knock on me, but I've always been a big film fan, especially in college, started making my own films and studying very seriously. But I didn't watch his films till maybe a couple years after college, where I was locking myself in a kind of a barn with blacked out windows in LA, just immersing myself in film history. And even with, him being a Greek, I'm half Greek, my father's Greek.
Yeah.
And my father met him outside of, I believe, the Angelica in the 70s when he was, I think he was screening, I think it was Faces. So my dad met him and spoke to him in Greek and said he was such a nice guy, which of course is echoed by anyone who ever came in contact with him. So there was a personal connection there. But as far as being exposed to his movies, I don't know. They're not on TV, for example. They're not even necessarily on Turner Classic Movies, or so you would have to look around to find them, and maybe have a little more of exposure to, or an interest in looking at different kinds of films, because his films they don't have music. They don't have a lot of editing. Or at least they're a little more passive in terms of some of the cinematic approach. And it's really about the characters and about uncomfortable emotions and resting in uncomfortable situations, which makes the audience uncomfortable. But that's what he was trying to do. He thought film could do more than just entertain people. He thought it could make them think and feel and maybe change. So I'm tremendously inspired by that. And although structurally, or even in terms of maybe genre, something like Covadonga is very different from that, or even Beach Pillows, I've always tried to make every moment within a scene or a shot real, because I know I can't really go wrong that way. It'll be funny, it'll be scary, it'll be whatever it is if I write it correctly and cinematically present it correctly. But as far as it being effective for an audience, I just need the performances to be real. And I think that's what he showed. He showed you could get together with your friends and a camera and kind of move people. And I think you can't overstate the importance of that lesson as an artist enough.
And when you, before you sat down to start writing Covadonga, and you had Beach Pillows already behind you, I don't want to say, does that present a problem in itself? Because if you obviously had success with Beach Pillows, does that mean you've got to step up to the plate? You know where I'm going with this, don't you? Yeah, in terms of,
I think so.
You've got something very successful, and then now you're thinking, well, you're kicking around ideas. You come up with this one. Was it always in the back of your mind were you ever thinking, shit, the last one done really well, so the pressure's on to come out with something better, or does it not work that way?
Well, I'll say that wasn't necessarily my experience of the Beach Pillows process. I mean, I was thrilled to have gotten the people involved that were involved. I was thrilled with the film I was trying to make, every inch of it. And then I've been thrilled and excited by the responses, by everybody who's seen it and has shared their feelings, and especially as the number of people have grown. But I still don't think it's a success by any sort of commercial metric or studio metric. So for me, and I think regardless, for me, I just take the lessons. I take everything that I feel like I can learn and do better. And as it relates to Beach Pillows, which was a very personal story that I wanted to tell first about where and whom I'm from, much like my favorite artists in any format, I kind of realized, okay, that was super personal, and I wanted to do it, but it's still a coming of age story that no matter how personal it is to me and maybe how much it transcends to a common experience, it's still a coming of age story that people maybe have seen some version of before. So with this, I said, I want to give people something they haven't seen. I want to use every one of my talents, if I can call them that, or any of my abilities, making music, writing, being physical, performing, and kind of all the emotion I have, to just push that on all fronts to really express myself and kind of try to create something that people would need to have an opinion on, good or bad. They couldn't just ignore it. So I don't know. I mean, there's so many films out there that they still might be able to ignore this, but I definitely took as big a swing as I could, and I'm very proud of what we were able to do.
And again, I should point out, I mean, you've got a pretty glittering academic career here, Sean. You attended Princeton, majoring in politics. Be interested to know why. You could have easily, presumably, become something like a political analyst. I guess all these kind of things crossed your mind. I know you began writing, directing, and so on. But why did you move away from that? Because you could have had a pretty incredible career, but I suspect there was a major reason you thought, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Well, politics was my major at school because I was interested in it, but it was also a little bit of the options that were available. I also played a sport in college, so
lacrosse.
That maybe limited.
Lacrosse.
It would have been.
Yeah, I see. Lacrosse. Right? That's incredible. Yeah, sorry, do carry on. That's amazing. Again, a glittering sports. You've done glittering sports career as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no. So that took up a lot of time, but that probably prohibited like a literature major. Just in terms of the time commitment. What I did focus, but politics classes, every class I took, I wrote papers for as opposed to take tests. So I definitely like writing and to do things on my own time. But as far as I took the only film classes that were available at the time, which were introductory film and video practice and then advanced film and video practice, 2 separate semesters, and made a bunch of films and just was so thrilled with the experience and probably spent more time on those classes than all my other classes combined, just shooting and cutting these films. So that wasn't a major option for me. They've since gotten an endowment since we left, so I think they have a lot more infrastructure there for filmmakers now. But anyway, politics, it interested me as far as it relates to political theories and how that influences policies. So, or theories of human beings. So basically the way political thinkers or philosophers interpreted humanity and the human condition would often influence their philosophical or political policies or ideas. And I found that very interesting, and that kind of informs what a lot of what I do, I think, storytelling wise, and just the way I feel about the world. I always, I wrote and made films in college. I grew up as a creative person, and I kind of knew this is where I was headed. Probably the most standard track for a Princeton graduate, especially among my kind of contingent, would be to just go into banking, into finance in the city, have a good living kind of insured. But for me, it's like money. Of course, I want to take care of my family, and I want us to be comfortable and all those good things. But I think everybody has to be happy and fulfilled and have a purpose in life. That's kind of a big theme in my work, maybe. So my wife was in finance, and she worked at JP Morgan for 8 years. She left to study medicine, and she just graduated and is, after she's done nursing this baby, will get into her residency at New York Presbyterian. So she was a great example for following your passion. And I know I'm not going to be any good to my family, my friends, my children, unless I'm setting a good example in terms of dedicating myself to something I believe I was put here to do and putting all of my passion and energy into it. And I felt like storytelling, communicating my ideas, is the most valuable thing I could do. I feel like that's why I'm here. I feel like that's why I've got like certain sets of innate interests and maybe hopefully abilities. So I'm just kind of using what I've been given and what calls me. No,
I agree with everything you say. My wife, I've only been married a month, but she's a nurse, actually.
Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you. So I know I know what you mean, and I know why. Like I say, it's kind of a calling that you have. I don't know if there's any other way to describe it in terms of something like that. Particularly with a health service, I think you have to be, or a teacher, or a priest, or a policeman. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, they're the most important jobs in the world, and they're not rewarded that way financially. Absolutely. So if I have to take, artists know that most of them aren't going to ultimately be compensated. I'm trying to, supplement it with full-time work in some other fields to make sure I can take care of my family. But if that's if the least you have to do is, struggle a little bit to do what you believe is important, then I'm willing to do that.
Okay, thank you. And what's next after juggling the films, the big family, everything else? What I assume you've got something else teed up, if you can talk about it, of course.
Oh yeah, I'm always happy to talk about anything. I think, or everything that I'm working on creatively. The funny thing is, Beach Pillows took 10 years from kind of the first draft to get it, to produce it, to make it myself. Yeah. So in that time, I used kind of my energy, my frustration to create a lot more material. So I've got kind of a catalog ready to go. So I'm not going to have a shortage of material as long as I'm able to make movies. But that said, I'm also generating new material from all the lessons I've learned and my new kind of interests and ideas. And I would like the next one, without saying too much, to be it's a story about the first artists set in prehistoric times. So it has some echoes of the first act of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Wow. And it doesn't have dialogue, and I think it's kind of an essential story, and I think I can make it. So that's what I'm focused on doing as my third film.
And would you mind me asking? And this isn't asking your to find out your political view, but now obviously I realise that you've majored in politics. Brexit and Trump. Who saw that coming? Do you have a comment?
Not me. But I think you can look at symptoms. I think you can look at symptoms in the culture that are exacerbated by people who have an interest in politics heading in that direction. So it's alarming, especially as someone who has a family. I believe in, without being too flippant or simplistic, I believe in love. And I believe in a community of love on this planet, regardless of borders, regardless of religion, regardless of race, sexual orientation, or anything else. So anybody that tries to kind of separate people and put up walls and get people blaming other people for their difficulties, I have a lot of frustration with that. And frankly, I think that inspires the emotion, at least, that leads to a lot of the work that I create.
No, I'm totally embarrassed and totally gutted about Brexit. And I would love to see, and I'm still dubious it will even happen. I know we've pulled the 2-year trigger. There is so much infighting. David Davis, who's over in Brussels now, is trying to negotiate out Brexit, walked out after an hour. You've got the Tories in disarray, Labour in disarray. We've had a general election. May lost her majority. You know what's happened. So I'm still hopeful and dubious that Brexit will even happen, Sean. I really am. I really don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think, I echo those hopes, I'm sure. And I've been inspired by, just one example would be Trump's kind of pulling out of the Paris Agreement and the response by the major corporations and cities in the United States to just independently stay in. And kind of the political movement inside this country in general. I mean, I think it has to be paired with positivity and kind of communion and just good ideas. But I am certainly upset. I think embarrassed is a fine word. With the direction of leadership in a lot of parts of the world currently, but you see some better looks in some other places, and certainly no lack of kind of no lack of a response from people who feel differently. So I just think there probably needs to be a little more of a message and a clear path forward, and just bring it. I don't want to get too political either, but I think successful politicians and leaders will speak to all people and kind of appeal to what they have in common. And because we have so much in common, we're all made of the same stuff. So I'm hopeful. I honestly, I think there's a dearth of leadership. I think people need to be led. And, maybe I'll get back into politics here.
I'm inspiring you. Sean. I'm inspiring you. No, it's lovely to hear. And it's, as I say, you're so eloquent, and it's interesting to hear your point of view. And I try not to talk to too many filmmakers about it, but you can't help it, especially at the festivals, because you won't be surprised to learn that a lot of them do want to talk about it. But you may be surprised to learn, I don't know, that virtually all of them are anti-Trump. I don't offer an opinion.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I don't offer an opinion.
I think that's the place of an artist. I think the place of an artist is to basically communicate in whatever form they want. Covadonga is a dark story, but I'm it's not advocacy, it's art. So I think any artist, by expressing themselves, is trying to communicate and connect. And I think that's an act of love. So I think the idea of love is in direct contrast to what someone like Trump represents in our world. So I find no surprise in any artist being opposed to him. And
what was, on that note, Ash, I suppose it does tie into that, what was the most uplifting thing either about making the film or the most uplifting message that you wanted to portray from the film?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty much that, and it's shown through maybe the missteps of our main character. But I think what I want to communicate in a lot of my work is that darkness in this world is inevitable. It's just a fact of life. Death is a fact of life. Tragedy is a fact of life. So our world, our personal kind of path in our world is dictated by our response to that. And I think the response needs to be one of love and positivity, and ultimately that can only be achieved through forgiveness. I think if you forgiving people who do the wrong thing, and forgiving kind of a history of war or struggle in any context, takes that power away and empowers you. So that's not a novel message. That's the message of Jesus Christ. Not to get too religious, but I think that's a message that is somehow lost. It seems like a pretty clear, a clearly communicated message, but one that's not convenient for people that try to fracture people, try to separate people, try to blame each other for each other's problems. So I think in order to remove ourselves from the cycles of violence and tragedy, whether it's personally with our own past or historically globally, I think it's about forgiveness, and that's the only way that we step outside of these cycles of violence and move forward in some sort of communion. So I know that's a little highfalutin, and the movie is an entertaining story with a lot of music and drama and action and some violence, but that's kind of my philosophy of life. And again, I didn't invent it, but I think it worked.
No, I've got no problem the way you explained it, Sean. It was wonderfully put and brilliantly explained, and that's what I was hoping to hear. I knew you'd come up with a really nice way to explain, and genuinely there was nothing wrong with every word you said, so thank you very much.